All right, betters, I have an amazing video for y'all today. You get to enjoy my interview with the one and only Richard Dolan. To talk about his new book, A History of USOs, Unidentified Submerged Objects, Volume 1, Beginnings to 1969. Richard Dolan is a prominent American UFO researcher, historian, and author known for his extensive work on the UFO phenomenon and its implications.
I'm Richard Dolan, a historian on the topic of UFOs.
With over 2 decades of dedication, he has authored several influential books, including UFOs and the National Security State, a 2-volume historical study exploring UFO incidents and government cover-ups from 1941 to 1991.
Esteemed members of the committee, thank you for having me. I just have a short statement here. The UFO problem has involved military personnel around the world for more than 60 years, and it is wrapped in secrecy.
And UFOs for the 21st Century Mind, a comprehensive overview of the subject.
Stories of strange objects in the sky actually go far back in time. But from the 1940s to our own era, military personnel from the United States and many other nations have encountered unidentified flying objects.
Dolan also co-authored AD After Disclosure, which speculates on the societal impacts of UFO disclosure and the alien agendas, analyzing potential extraterrestrial motives.
Former head of the CIA, Roscoe Hillenkotter, speaking in 1960. Behind the scenes, high-ranking Air Force officers are soberly concerned about UFOs, but through official secrecy and ridicule, many citizens are led to believe the unknown flying objects are nonsense.
Through his publishing company, Richard Dolan Press, public lectures, and media appearances, he combines historical analysis with geopolitical and futuristic perspectives, earning recognition as a leading voice in ufology.
Now, how much clearer a statement should responsible citizens, academicians, media, and political leadership require before demanding to get some reasonable answers as to what is going on behind the scenes in relation to the phenomenon of UFOs? Because the problem certainly did not end during the 1960s or 1970s or 1980s, but has continued to the present day.
And today, Richard and I will talk about what's going on in our oceans.
Knowledge of the oceans is more than a matter of curiosity. Our very survival may hinge upon it. The seas offer a wealth of food for the people of the world. Mineral resources on land will ultimately reach their limits. We may be able to extract additional elements in the water. To predict, and perhaps someday to control, changes in weather and climate is of the utmost importance to man everywhere. These changes are controlled to a large and yet unknown extent by what happens in the ocean. Additional research is necessary to identify the factors in this interplay. These are some of the reasons which compel us to embark upon an important national effort in oceanography. This is not a 1-year program or even a 10-year program. It is the first step in a continuing effort to acquire and apply the information about a part of our world that will ultimately determine conditions of life in the rest of the world. The opportunities are there. A vigorous program will capture those opportunities.
All right, veterans, look who I have in the house. You're not going to believe it. I twisted his arm, and I got him on the show, Mr. Richard Dolan. Thank you so much, man, for joining us.
Hi, Patrick. I think this is going to be really enjoyable. I'm looking forward to it.
Hell yeah. Awesome, man. Well, look, you clearly have a brand new book that's coming out. I've seen a couple of interviews of you going around and promoting it, and I even remember you talking about it ahead of time, all the work you were putting into it. And then I realized this is just volume 1 of 3 that are going to be coming out. My goodness. So let me read the title here. So this is your new book. It's called A History of USOs, Unidentified Submerged Objects, volume 1, from the beginning to 1969.
Yeah.
Wow. And of course, I'll put a link in the description. No affiliate link. I make no money, y'all. Okay. I'm just trying to help Richard here sell some books. Let's go out and get them. We got Kindle, paperback, hardback, no excuses.
Audiobook's coming out very, very soon, by the way.
Are you reading the
Not
audiobook?
this one. No, I'd love to, but you got to understand. I read one very long audiobook. I did UFOs for the 21st Century Mind. And I am still, this has taken years, but I'm in the process of still reading. I hate to even, this is almost embarrassing, but volume 2 of UFOs in the National Security State. That's a 600-page book, which has already truly broken 2 previous audio readers that I had hired. And it's too long for Amazon to do they have to get the auto voice thing.
Yeah.
I would do it at this point for that, because some of their voices are decent, but it's too long for that. So the only way is I've got to read that volume 2 of National Security State, and I'm in it. So no, I can't. There's no way to read an audiobook. For me, it's a huge undertaking, and so I'm just hiring. I got a really good reader. He's great, and he just sent me some more audio this morning. So I think that will be ready. Yeah, one of the chapters. So he's doing a nice job. And I think certainly within the month, we'll have the audiobook out for that.
No, that's awesome. I will say this, and I totally get what you're saying, but from a fan perspective, and again, if I had to do this, I don't know what I would do personally, but I remember when Imminent came out, Luis Elizondo's book, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he released an audiobook of it, and it was him speaking. And I can't tell you how many people told me in the vetted community, man, that was awesome that he read it. Like it made me want to, it was like a 10-hour interview with him, and people were just so, and I don't know, I think that might've made a difference if he wasn't the one reading it. So I don't know. I don't know.
I totally understand that. I'm very sympathetic to it. And
yeah,
people have said the same about me. They want to hear me read my books.
Sure.
And I would love to, believe me, but it's
just logistically
it's not easy. It's like, when you read a book, so like, you read through it and you read, and then you make a mistake. You got to stop, and then you go over it, and then you start a new clip and you keep going. And it takes a long time for every hour that's finished product. It's many, many more hours of reading, and then the post-production, all of which I'm terrible at, by the way.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I have done this process, and I may do it again, but for right now, it's like, look, I got to get this thing out because people want audiobooks.
That's true. People want audiobooks, man. That's how they listen. I mean, that's pretty much how I take in books too, is audio, because I can, do errands around the house. I can walk my dogs. I can be in the car. I can.
Absolutely. I think it would sound as good as an audiobook. There's a couple, I was about to say, marginally long-windy parts where I'm doing data analysis. I have a whole section in this where it's 35 pages where I'm doing a extended analysis of all of the data that I've amassed for these cases. But even that, I think is, I think it's a pretty good read. And then the cases themselves, they'll sound great on an audiobook.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Could
They're
even be
amazing.
clipped out.
They're
for
incredible
sure.
cases.
So look, let's talk about this this book here, right? A history of USOs, right? Just UFOs underwater, as I just call it, but submerged objects underwater. And to be honest, I didn't realize there were so many events and incidents for you to be able to put together such, a collective of information here in cases. Like I just didn't even realize there's that many available. Were you that surprised as well when you jumped into this?
I was quite surprised. Honestly, I was very surprised. So I started this project about 3 years ago in 2022.
Oh my God.
Just for my website. So I have a great website. I love the people there. And I was asked by one of the members about a particular case that is a USO case from the 1940s. And it's one that I had known about. So like what I'll often do is I'll create like a little video presentation for the members of the site. And I did that. And I thought, this is really interesting. Like, let's look for some others. And I want to ask myself, like, where am I going to scrounge these up? Like, where are there good sources of water-based accounts? And they're not easy. They were not easy to find automatically. There was one website from a recently deceased researcher named Carl Feind. And I had known Carl, and he was a great guy. And he did very exceptional work on UFOs and water. So he wasn't just looking at USOs. He was looking at the interaction of UFOs with water scientifically, and in all types of water, including like rain and fog, which I was less interested in for this study. But I mean, that's legit what he was doing. But
Sure.
anyway, Carl had written a very good book on this, and he had collected well over 1,000 cases for his website, which was still fully available when I started looking. It's kind of in limbo now. But anyway, I went through everything on Carl's website, which was great. And then to be clear, only a percentage of those cases were, in my opinion, really appropriate for what I was looking for. But there were a lot that were. And then I went into the National UFO Reporting Center, which is one of my favorite places.
Yeah.
It's not the best organization, I mean, I have to say, but they have a huge amount of information in there. And I went through all of that. I have to say I was very, very, very thorough with that. There's thousands and thousands. And I was looking for any kind of water-based, Navy-based, lakes, rivers, oceans, didn't matter. And then I was very lucky to get access to the MUFON database. It's called their CMS. I'm not a MUFON investigator. I mean, officially, I shouldn't have access, but the MUFON leadership was very nice to me about this, and they allowed me full access to their cases. And then, I just hunted down like out of print magazines and books. And
Oh my gosh, so sorry.
We all have animals. I've got a cat. She's less loud, but she will make herself known every now and then.
Kill him.
But anyway, I just hunted through all of the sources that I knew how to find.
Yeah.
George Filer has a site called Filer's Files.
Hang on, Richard. I'm so sorry. Chicos, vámonos, ya está. Para, por Dios. Okay. Sorry. They are Spanish dogs, actually, so I speak to them in Spanish. My apologies.
That's awesome.
I'm so sorry.
Dogs like people come in all different languages, so why should we be surprised?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so sorry. Please.
Yeah. So that's it. So I hunted down. This is fun.
Oh, you know what, Richard? Hang on. There is someone at my door. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Oh my gosh, hang on.
Don't worry about it. Oh.
A few moments later.
Okay, had a package delivered. My God, what about timing there? Jesus, I'm so sorry, Richard.
Don't worry about it.
Really,
it's
I mean that.
Totally normal.
Okay.
I haven't lost my train of thought. We're good.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Yeah. So after just gathering together all the different sources, and it took a while to really find them all. And in fact, really through the course of researching this and writing it, I continually was finding more sources, many, like a lot of obscure magazines from the 1970s and things like this. So it was fun.
That.
It was actually, that part is always enjoyable for me. And I just would go through all the candidates, as I would call them. I mean, I went through thousands and thousands of potential USO cases and ended up selecting a little bit less than 700 of them for inclusion.
Wow.
And initially, I don't know that I could say I had a specific criterion or set of criteria other than that the case had to seem interesting and worthy to me. It was a purely subjective decision. Really what I was looking for were a couple of things. I couldn't just take a case that was so bare bones, and a lot of them are. You get cases where it's like literally a sentence or two sentences, and there's just not much to go on. And I certainly would discard cases that just seemed a little too crazy or difficult to believe. Sometimes that is subjective. And I wanted to include cases that I thought at least there is an opportunity for me to do some kind of follow-up, even if the person's dead, but if I'm looking for specific dates and specific locations and things like this. So Once I put those cases all in one collection, I did actually develop a evidence rating system that I incorporated into the book. And this actually started out as a suggestion from my wife, Tracy. She wasn't thinking of rating the evidence, but she said, you got all these cases. Some of them are really short and brief. Some are really long. Like, wouldn't it be nice if you just had a series of facts at the beginning of each one, like basic, like, what did the thing look like? What shape was it? What color was it? How close was the witness to it? What was it doing with the water? Was it under the water? Was it emerging from the water? And so forth.
Oh, I love
And
this. Yeah.
it was a good idea. I almost didn't want to do it because it was more work, but
What's more work? Yeah.
but I thought, well, I'm going to do this. So I went back over the cases, and this took actually several months, but I went back and I extracted from each case roughly about 15 different data points. And I did
Oh my
do that
God.
for yeah, but it was worth it.
Yeah, totally.
And like, did it happen in the daytime or at night? It was a simple thing, but I'm very glad I did that.
Sure.
Did the object express a potential interest in the witness?
Sure.
That's a subjective one, but I really tried to be careful about that. So I put all of these things in there. And then once that was done, I thought, well, really, this should be a spreadsheet. And I'd
Oh, you
never
made
made
us.
it.
Oh my God.
It was the first spreadsheet I ever created in my life. I'd never
Oh,
done
really?
it. So it's massive.
That's
Someone
funny.
actually gave me a little quick tutorial on like how to do this, but I put
Yeah.
that together. And by the way, that's a free download on my website as a PDF. It's 37
Really?
pages. It's very long, and it helps probably to have the book to understand what is in there. But yes, I made that available. It's like every single case, all the data points, strength of evidence, all of that stuff. It's in there. And the strength of evidence, what I broke down was I put 5 different factors and I gave them a weighted level of significance. And I don't have to go into the whole thing here, but essentially, like, how good is the source? Honestly, like, are we talking about just someone, telling their dad's story 50 years later? Not that that could be untrue. That could be totally true, but compared with, multiple newspaper accounts or declassified government documents, or even if it was a MUFON investigated case, like, you look for things like this. So the strength of that source, any level of corroboration, how quickly was the report made from when it happened, how close was the witness to the actual thing, whatever was being reported, things like this. So I tried to factor in a variety of these things to give a kind of from the low of 2, the high of 12, and for basically
Oh, a scoring system.
scoring system,
Oh, okay. That's cool.
and that exists
Wow.
for every case.
Yeah. Oh,
And
wow.
in the spreadsheet, you can read how each case is broken down
Sure.
by each factor. So I try to be very upfront and transparent about the whole process that I did. I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm sure it is not, but it was the best I could do, and I think it's a reasonably good start. Other people can take that idea and certainly improve on it, I have no doubt.
Well, they can dig further on a particular case if they
Yeah.
want to, right? Yeah, you gave them a starting point essentially. So okay, well that's interesting. Yeah, because one of the questions I was going to ask, what evidence is required for you to include like one of these stories in it, but it sounds like you did have a system and how you were going to work that out, and love that.
Yes, there's a system. I mean, but to go a little more on this, because it's an important topic. Like, how do you know if a case is bulletproof or not? And this is a difficult thing to know, because even a case
Yeah,
where the evidence is strong,
sure.
let's say, because there are some where you literally have declassified CIA documents, where you literally have declassified government documents of different types, Project Blue Book even, and some others. Like, we know that something here happened, or a really good newspaper account. Like, we know something happened, but that doesn't mean that it's an alien craft. Like, there
Sure.
are lots of things going on here. On the other hand, a case that seems weak in terms of evidence could completely be true. And so
100%.
yeah, so you want to be careful there. What you do find with a lot of the cases, particularly the military ones, I find, but actually a lot of the civilian ones as well, is that you will read about them. Sometimes they'll give their name and sometimes they will not give their name. And it could be 20 or 30 or even more years after the fact when they write to some website, some blog, about what happened to them when they served aboard the USS, whichever, back in the 1970s or 1960s. And that's just the way it is. It's like, you can say, well, okay, this is not declassified. This is not confirmed by anyone else. I will agree with that. But then on the other hand, you've got not just this one ex-Navy guy, but you've got like 100 other ex-Navy guys who have told their story. Am I supposed to just pretend that these don't exist? And I just don't think that's right. So, you want to factor all of these things in and get as reasonable a picture as you can. Last thing I'll say about the strength of evidence and all of the statistics. When I started looking at this in the form of a spreadsheet, there were patterns that I had noticed that I would never have noticed otherwise. And maybe we can talk about some of those patterns later, but the point is that when you see certain patterns, some of which could be kind of theoretically predictable, but others not necessarily, but they are explicit, they're clear, and they're very consistent. So that tends to give me confidence in the authenticity of the stories themselves. The fact that certain types of craft are portrayed in the same color, or doing, you have certain consistencies in things like electromagnetic interference under various conditions and not under others. So there's this underlying consistency that, again, I would never have noticed if I had not laid out the factors into a coherent spreadsheet and just see the patterns.
Yeah.
So I'm very glad I did this, and it does give a lot more confidence in the quality of these seemingly random stories coming in from everywhere, but there's a consistency in those patterns.
Once you put them all together, now you get a different picture, like a puzzle, right? I mean, essentially, little puzzle pieces. Boom, you can see a larger picture. I that seems completely logical to me, to be honest with you. That's interesting. I do want to pull the thread on the patterns. But just one quick question that I have is, when you were doing this, did the object have to actually, I know it says, this may seem like a dumb question, but it's not, I promise. It's in the title, submerged objects, but for you to include it in the book, could it just be around water, or it actually had to go into the water?
I started thinking it's got to have some contact with the water, but I did end up taking close to 10% of the cases where the object was seen directly over the water. Now, in most of those cases, it's directly over the water in the middle of a major ocean. So like when you're out there, you're hundreds of miles from the shore, and you see this thing that's like 10 feet over the water. It's not unreasonable to think this thing was very possibly in the water at some point or another. And furthermore, I was likely to include those types of cases if it involved one of the major world navies, or any navy, U.S. Navy, Russian, Soviet Navy, and the like. So if those were the case, I did want to include those, even if it wasn't confirmed to be in the water, because it just, it's part of the pattern.
Yeah, I agree. That's why I asked.
Close, yeah. And occasionally they're
thing.
sucking up the water, like there are a number of those cases and so forth.
Yeah, I do want to talk about a case that I heard you talking about. That just is crazy to me. I mean, there's a few things here that I want to pull a thread on. That, what you just talked about, the water getting pulled out, patterns, but also like, you put a scoring system on all of these cases. I'm sure you're going to get asked in all these interviews, what's the best case and all of this. But let me see if I can ask it a little differently. What may not necessarily be the best case, but what's your favorite case from this? They may not be the same, or maybe they are. I don't know.
I have several favorite cases.
Sure.
And some of them are very strong, and some are not that strong. That's the thing in terms of evidence.
That's why I asked. Exactly. But it's your favorite. There's something about it that,
I'm going to give you one that's actually, like, I consider weak technically, but which I completely believe. Why do I believe this?
Looking for. Yeah.
This one came through my wife and her doctor, who she's very good friends with.
Yeah.
So her doctor's, and I know this lady, she's very awesome individual, very highly intelligent, and like when she says something, this is her doctor, I know I can take it to the bank. There's not a shred of doubt. So anyway, this doctor, her father, was a retired police officer and boxer, tough guy, who liked to go fishing. And he's on Lake Erie in not far from where I am. I'm in upstate New York.
Yeah.
He's at Lake Erie in sometime in the early 90s. We don't have the exact year. And this, again, you get this typically when like the child of the parent tells the story years later. It's like, well, sometime in the 90s. So he was alone. He was fishing. It was at night. He's in a boat. I don't know how far off the shore he was, but she said he told me the story a million times. You get that. So what happened was he's fishing. It's totally dead silent around him. He hears a kind of splashing sound. He turns and he sees this flying saucer that apparently had just come out of the water. And it's it had the water column beneath it. So it was somehow, it appeared to be sucking up water. It scared the hell out of him so bad. She said, my dad was never afraid of anything, was her thing. He was the ultimate tough guy. Like in a tight spot, you want him. But this scared the hell out of him, terrified him. And then so it water pulled up and it just moved off. That was it. Wow. Like a simple. So in terms of evidence, I can't say this is an outstanding case, but how am I not going to believe that? Sure. So that's one. One case that I just love, and I have fun when I think about it, and I've mentioned it once or twice. It took place back in the 50s. And this is also not a military case. This is a married couple. And they also liked fishing. So this is 1955 at a reservoir in New York State, near New York City, called the Titicus Reservoir. If you go in that area, there's a lot of like tiny little lakes all over the place there. And this is like 2.5 miles long, not a very big body of water, but it was a very pleasant place. People would go there. No motorboats were allowed on the body of water, rowboats only, this type of thing. So they're at this place at midnight, and I forget the exact date. It's in the summertime, and so it's the husband and wife. This is what they like to do. This is like their cool thing, and they're at the shore. So they drive there, and they take a boat and they row about a mile to where they're going to do their bit, and they're at the shore. And this is when they see this orangey basketball-sized sphere come out of the water.
Oh my God.
There's nothing else there. Comes out of the water, and then they see these two elongated, like 30-foot long, bluish white tubes. They said it was almost like fluorescent tubes, except they were 30 feet long, and there were two of them, and the orange ball was directly above it. You got these two things, and they're just over the water now. It's pitch black otherwise.
Yeah.
So this is the crazy part. The husband says, I want to get in my rowboat and row out to that thing. The wife is like, are you out of your mind? She had to be. I'm inferring here, but I have to think.
Sure.
Well, he gets into the boat alone, and he starts rowing out. It's pitch black. It's midnight. There's nothing else there. And he starts to go toward it, and he's noticing that these lights, whatever they are moving away from him. And so he's realizing it's reacting to him, and that spooks him, I guess. So he starts rowing back to his wife. So then they decide, okay, I think we've had enough of this. We're out of here.
Yeah.
So, but now they have to row back to their car, which is a mile away.
Oh my God.
All of this is there. So they get into the boat and they start rowing, and they were interviewed shortly after this by actually a very responsible UFO organization at the time called Civilian Saucer Investigation. They didn't exist for a long time, but they were good while they lasted.
Yeah.
They did a long interview with these people. But anyway, so they're rowing back, and the lights are tracking them. They're following them, including shining the light on their boat and on them at times. It's like they were hit by the light from this object. So it was obviously there, but they were not harmed in any way. They were not bothered. They make it back to where they park their boat, and they get out and they go to their car, and they could still actually see this thing from the parking lot just before they drove home. We have their names. Their last name was
Wow.
Bordus. They were seen to be like a stand-up couple by the investigators, and it was written about in one of the really excellent early treatments of this subject from a long time ago. So, I mean, I just love that case because it's
Yeah.
like you get this human element again. You know, these
Sure.
just interesting people having this amazing encounter. I'm sure they never forgot it.
Oh, absolutely. Well, there's something so interesting about that. I don't know if I've heard a description like that before, right? Of the glowing ball, the two, like I don't. That's new to me, to be honest with you. And the light, it clearly must have been some sort of, well, maybe not. I mean, I'm not a light expert, but had some sort of directional aspect. It wasn't just an ambient light. If it hit him only on certain times, does that make sense?
Yes, it does, and that's what I had inferred as well.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, so
and then you
crazy.
have to ask yourself: so you're just north of New York City. This is a quiet area. This is
Yeah.
not that built up. But it's a little reservoir. The question is, what the hell is this thing doing in that little body of water in the middle of the night?
Totally.
And there's where we're just grasping at speculation. But sometimes, I mean, I'll always try to ask myself, like, what is this thing doing, or what does it look like it's doing? And sometimes I can come up with a theory, and sometimes I just can't easily come up with one.
Oh, of course. Like, what's the purpose? I always ask that on any case I hear. What are they doing there? What is the
Right?
purpose of that event? Like,
Exactly.
why go to that body of water, put on that demonstration? Like, what are they doing? You know what I was thinking about earlier when you said the one case about the boxer police officer guy who was
Yeah.
out on the right Lake Erie, and the water was, let's get into this, sucking up into this crap. And it just hit me. How do we know that they're sucking up water and not putting water in?
That's a good question. Well, I don't really know, except that, all I can go on are witness accounts where they will say it looked like it was sucking up the water. And that's really
Yeah,
about all you can say.
sure.
In this first volume, I do include a couple of those cases. One was from India in 1967. And I had a great illustrator for this collection, Alan Levine. He's a dear friend of mine now. And
Nice.
Alan did an illustration of that particular event. And I think, he did it fairly accurately. I was very nitpicky with a lot of them. I really wanted them to be accurate. And I think
Sure.
he did this very accurately. But it was a case reported in Indian newspapers for multiple days. This was an ongoing thing in the northeastern part of India. It's kind of like a backwater part of India. It's getting near, I guess, what was once called Burma, so Myanmar.
Okay.
Anyway, in that area, or near Bangladesh as well. So you had a bunch of villagers, village people saying that this object comes into the area, and it actually caused some damage to some of the woodland area. It might have hit a tree. That seems to be the implication. And it was seen over this little stream, classic disc-shaped UFO, flying saucer, sucking up the water out of this stream. So, what are they doing? Like, there's
Yeah.
a lot of those. And in fact, I didn't even include every one of the accounts of the object sucking up water because, I mean, when I asked myself, is that technically a USO? And you could argue against that, but I thought they're so interesting. I wanted to include
Oh,
at least some
definitely.
of them.
Yeah.
Some of them.
How many cases do you think there are of that? I mean, if you were to put a percentage on what you included in your book, I don't know,
Well,
5%,
now,
2%, or I don't even know.
of the sucking up the water,
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
slow percentage that I
Okay.
included. Uh, Probably less than 5% that of the cases I
But
included.
there's even more cases you didn't include
Yes,
that you
that's
heard
right.
about that. Okay.
That's
That's
exactly
interesting.
true. Yeah, so there were a lot of cases I left out, and I'm sure there are lots of genuine USO cases that I left out just because they were too threadbare and I couldn't really do much with them.
Sure.
I didn't want to make a complete compendium of all of them. What I wanted to do was take the best cases where there's some meat on the bones, and to try to breathe life into them. Honestly, I
Sure.
didn't start out by doing wanting to do a statistical breakdown or anything like that. I wanted to just start by saying, you've got these incredible things that happen to these people. Many of them are long gone now. Often the most astonishing thing that ever happened in their life. And they often were subject to ridicule or disbelief. But yet I think these things happened. And I just thought it's a terrible shame that we lose this. It's not just an important thing in the history of UFOs. And when you really get down to it, it's potentially an extremely important thing in the history of planet Earth. I mean, look, you have an
Yeah.
advanced human society here. We're doing our thing. And yet there seems to be someone else checking us out and engaging with the bodies of water on this planet. How is that not a monumental moment in the history of human civilization and the history of our Earth? So I didn't want that to be lost, and I wanted to make them as vivid and real and true as I knew how to do. That was my goal, and I
Yeah.
needed something that had something to start with.
Sure.
So that's where I was coming from.
No, absolutely. It does get me thinking about the water getting sucked up. If to ask some of these witnesses, I know you say it's sucked up because that just seems like the most logical, but is that what it actually looked like, or could it be possible that the UFO was putting
Oh
a
yes,
liquid into the
well,
ocean? I find that fascinating, just because it changes the whole idea of, if you start speculating, well, what were they doing there? Why are they taking
yes,
the
yes.
water out?
So off
So,
the top of my head, I can think of several cases where these objects were seen putting something into the water.
see,
In fact,
that's interesting.
many such cases. So
That's
one,
interesting.
yes, one was from Aguadilla, Puerto Rico in I think 1989. This is a really amazing case, in my opinion. And in this case, so Aguadilla, Puerto Rico is like a big rectangle in the Caribbean there.
Yeah.
So if you look at the north western corner, that's Aguadilla. Many people are aware that there was a very interesting video that was from Aguadilla from 2013.
Yeah.
And that,
Yep.
by the way, that's part of volume 3. I've got that. I've already
Oh,
treated that
nice.
case. But Aguadilla has more than just that video. Puerto Rico is basically the king of USOs, in my opinion. It's the biggest hotspot of any, especially the northern shore there, but also the east and west coast. Very, very active. The southern coast, a little less so. But Aguadilla, in the northwest corner there, very active area. So in 1989, there's a fisherman who also happened to be a qualified scuba diver. So he's in his boat, and he's like 2 miles off the shore, I think. And he's got his scuba gear or his diving gear with him. So he's out on his boat, he's alone, and he sees this. This is daytime, by the way. So he sees this glow below the water, not far from his position. And he's curious about it, and he's like, what is that thing? So
Yeah.
he gets his diving gear on, and he goes into the water to investigate it. And this is his story. He gets in under the water. He's able to see this is a flying saucer. This is a disc-shaped object under the water.
Wow.
And he gets close enough to it to touch it. And what he saw or felt actually was that on one side of the craft there was like there was these grates, like that's like a filtration system almost, and you could feel the water being sucked into the craft at this one part, and on the other side, he swam to the other side, and you could feel the pressure of the water coming out through that. It was almost as if it was filtering water through the craft in his
Interesting.
estimation.
Yeah.
So that's a clear interaction, and I would say some kind of filtration of the water going on with this craft. So he starts getting a little nervous. Who can blame him? And he goes back to his boat, and that's the last that he saw of it. And it departed after that. But holy smokes! And then there's one other case I'll just mention, and I was just looking at this earlier this morning for whatever reason, from 1979, off the coast of Big Sur, California. So Southern California there. And this is, again, 1979. A man and a woman are at the beach. I think it was getting a bit dark, but visibility was good. and they see a black triangle not coming out of the water. I don't, God, I can't remember now. I get a lot of these cases mixed up,
Yeah.
but it was low over the water. And what was interesting about this is that they watched it drop 2 glowing balls into the water. And this is not the only time that I have these types of reports.
Yeah.
There are several of these where some kind of thing is dropped into the water by a craft. In this case, 2 glowing orangey types of things that go into the water. They're both like totally jazzed up. They're into this sighting. And the object then, the triangle just takes off really fast. And one of them, I think the guy, screams out to the craft, "Take me with you." But it was gone. And it left behind a kind of luminous trail that lasted for a couple of minutes after the fact, apparently.
Well,
And that
that's
was that.
interesting.
That was that.
That's
So what
interesting.
was this dropping into the water? Like,
Sure. Little
who knows?
orbs, something. Who knows, right? Yeah. It's always hard to try to understand why in this field, why this thing is happening, or why this event, why this person, why this, whatever, across all of it. And that doesn't mean it's not true or not if you can't understand the why. But what else do we have but to ask those questions? You try
No,
to
exactly.
understand the situation, better. Because I think like that guy that was in Puerto Rico who's like, oh, I see a light under the wall. I'm going to put on the thing and go down there. I mean, I have a bazillion, like, why is that? Why right there? Why didn't the craft notice that he's there touching it? Maybe it didn't care, like a fish coming up to it, just like doesn't really care. And also, like, is it sitting on the ground floor or just floating in the middle, surrounded by water all the way around? Like, it's not perched on a rock. It's,
No. It was
you know,
under the water. It was shallow. It wasn't deep under the water. That's why he was able
yeah,
to see it. And it was just there. There's one other case I'll just
yeah.
off the top of my head from the Black Sea near Crimea in
Okay.
2001. So early 21st century case.
Yeah.
And this will be in my 3rd volume as well.
Okay. I
I've
was
got
going to
them all
say,
written out. No,
yeah.
everything that I've mentioned here, if it hasn't yet been published in the 1st volume, it's coming out in the 2nd or 3rd. So this one, I forget her name. She was a woman who was a very accomplished swimmer. She liked to swim out in the into the Black Sea. She was kind of far out, apparently, but I guess that was okay with her. And she sees. I'm trying to remember the specifics. I think it had come out of the water. It was a somewhat elongated, saucer-shaped, silvery thing that comes directly out of the water. It's very low over the water. And she's, in the water, her head sticking up over the water. That's it. And she's looking at this thing. And it's just her and this craft. And it's a beautiful craft. She described it as like silvery, kind of reflective. I mean, it was just a gorgeous piece of machinery or technology or whatever it was.
Sure.
And she started to get a little scared. She's like, who wouldn't be a little bit nervous? You're seeing this thing. And she later stated that she felt like this message come in from this thing. Essentially, it's cool. Don't worry. You're fine. We're not going to do anything to you. It was
Like
a very,
telepathically, right? Like,
very telepathically.
yeah.
And it was
Yeah.
like the way she described it, it was like a very chill kind of a message, as it were.
Yeah.
Very kind of calm and low key and almost friendly. They were like, you're good.
Yeah.
And that's her story. And like, you ask yourself, do I choose to believe this or not? Well, yes, I think, people do interview these folks. They, most of these people are not looking for notoriety or fame. It's very obvious when you read the account. They're not looking for money. They're not looking to get notice. In fact, a lot of them don't want that because of the opposite reason. They were afraid of social stigma and things like this.
Sure. Especially at that time, right? When she had this event, even though we've come a long way into 2025, that stigma still exists about it. When it comes down to like belief, I've definitely have my up and downs there. And I think I've kind of just come to I'm tired of thinking about if I believe somebody or don't believe somebody, or do I believe this story or don't believe the story. I just take all the data in, and I just live in the land of I don't know. And I enjoy it either way, like I love hearing all the different stories, but
Yeah.
it's almost impossible to be like, is this true or not, based on such small little data points. And even if you were to say, well, why would they lie? This person, yeah, that's not enough for me to be like, that's alien. I get that point, and that definitely makes sense. But I don't know why we even need to go down the road of believe, like we need to believe or not believe, because that's like the first choice we're supposed to make when an interview comes out of a whistleblower, when someone tells a story, an experience. I get them told all the time to me, and I just learned stop making that, you know binary choice, Patrick, right? Like you have to either believe them or don't believe them. It's like, why do I have to say I believe it or don't believe it? I can't make an intelligent, informed decision like that, so I just live in, again, the land of I don't know, and
I hear
I
you.
take all this stuff in, and a preponderance of evidence like you've put together in a book, just volume 1, right, only up to 1969. I mean, something's clearly going on. Just don't know
Yeah.
what it is. So, like, let's say, for instance, the patterns you spoke about earlier. What are some of these main
Yeah.
patterns that you're seeing through all of this? Because that's
Yeah. Let's do
interesting
that.
to me.
And by the way, I think your points are very well taken. I get that a lot. The late Stanton Friedman had a really good expression. He said, I'm putting it in my gray box. It's like, I don't know if
Yeah,
it's true or if it's not true.
yeah,
And
exactly.
and
I
Stan
like
was
that.
good with that, and you're good with that, like being willing to accept a little bit of uncertainty because you're going to get that with this, and you do have to
Yeah,
do that. I do
yeah,
want to be as careful and as objective as I'm able to be, and I
sure,
want to deal only with what I think is true. So I am trying to make that determination when I read a case. Ultimately, it's like, does it pass my own smell test? Do I think it's true?
sure.
Um, and if it doesn't, then I don't want it in. Like, and I believe me, a lot of the cases I looked at flunked that test. So I'm trying. I am trying to get the ones that I am confident in, but I can't say that I'm infallible either. Obviously, I can't say that.
Of course.
As far as the patterns, yeah, there are some really good ones. So I'll start with the most the one that really grabbed my attention because it was just so surprising, which was the day versus night pattern. And so what
Okay.
I noticed, like, if UFOs or USOs were a strictly naturalistic phenomenon, you might think that it would occur equally in the daytime and as much as the nighttime. I mean, maybe there are naturalistic reasons why it wouldn't, but I don't know. I'm thinking the Earth is always 50% in daytime, 50% in nighttime, no matter what. And what I found in the cases up until around 1967, the late 60s, was that they did occur roughly equally between daytime and nighttime. Now, I have to say this is because between the cases that I selected,
Sure.
based on the only criterion, which was, do these feel like good cases to me? But
Yeah.
among all of those, there's several hundred of them. It was a pretty big data set. It was 51% occurred in the daytime up until the late 60s. And then what I was not expecting, well, actually, even before I get to the change, during that early period up to the late 60s, there was a distinctive difference between military and non-military accounts. So if you were a civilian, you were way more likely to have it happen during the daytime. If you were military, you were definitely more likely to have it at night, even in that period. But then after 1967, I liken it to someone just flipping a switch, and 3/4 of them all were at night, and which they have been to this day. And whereas military cases since the late 60s have occurred almost 90% at night. It's overwhelming for the military
Well,
cases. And that was weird, and that was not something that I would have expected, and it's not something I would have noticed if I had not
yeah,
broken it down to the
exactly.
spreadsheet. I would not, even after
Totally.
having written them all out, I would not have noticed that
Sure.
pattern. So it was very odd, very unexpected, and it really got me thinking, like, why?
I was just
Well,
going to ask that. Why?
one thing that I would say is that the operators of these craft are able to distinguish between military and non-military, it seems, because there's a behavioral change there. And then you get the much more comprehensive switch to nighttime encounters, not exclusively, but a
Sure.
large percentage.
A
And
majority.
why? And all I'm doing is speculating here. I don't really know, but by the late 60s, there were a lot of, like, we humans were very much expanding our ability to see them in all different ways. We were putting satellites up in the atmosphere. We were
Yeah.
put in orbit, and we were developing other methods of being able to see them. And maybe, I don't know, a decision was made that it was a little more stealthy to do this at night, where all you would see would be either nothing or a bright light where you wouldn't be able to make out what this was. I wonder. It's only a speculation, but it does indicate a behavioral change. So that was something that I thought, wow. Along those lines, it's an interesting pattern when you look at something like electromagnetic interference. And that's one thing that I also tried to track in these cases. So the first EM interference case that I noted in my collection, these are USOs, not UFOs,
Yeah.
was in 1951. And so starting from 1951 going to today, just under 10% of all of those cases had EM interference. I think 9.5%, pretty high percent. Now, that percentage
What do you
changes.
mean by
Oh, yeah.
electromagnetic
Like
interference?
compass goes crazy, or your radio goes dead, or your weapon systems go offline, or your
Okay.
communications coming into the ship go offline, or in some cases, your ship's or your boat's engine dies. Like all of those have
Fuck.
been reported.
Okay.
That's happened.
Got it.
So that's
Wow.
EM interference, right? Something like that. That's just like it's screwing with your equipment.
Sure.
That's almost 10% of all cases since the early 50s. However, if it's a military case, that goes to 20%. I think it's like 19%. So about, instead of 1 out of 10, it's 1 out of 5. That's a significant difference. And
Sure.
then if in the few cases where someone reports missing time in connection to a USO, or they see what they believe is a being in connection to it, and there are some of those as well, small number. If it's one of those people were 4 times more likely than the average to experience electromagnetic or report electromagnetic interference. So they were like a 40%
Wow.
likelihood as opposed to the 10%. So I look at that and I'm like, I would not have thought about this. I would not have thought that missing time cases have higher EM interference, but why would that seem illogical to me? And that was a
Sure.
pattern that it's in there. Fascinating. And it makes me conclude that we're dealing with an adaptive and a high level of intelligence. These guys, whoever's operating them, they know what they're doing. They know exactly what they are doing. And I think, and they're very confident that they can do anything. They are confident that I think they have nothing to worry about from us. That's what I
Sure.
believe.
Well, if they're that advanced, yeah, they don't feel any threat
Yeah,
from
because like
us.
they're not attacking. There's no overt hostilities that I have been able to notice, but they are brazen as hell. And
Sure.
they will come right over U.S. aircraft carriers and shut down communications for up to half an hour at a time. Like they can
Yeah,
do that. That's a pretty, brazen thing to do. And
I
yet
agree.
it happens, and then they go off and do their thing.
Do you think like that let's this is going to be such a weird example, but this is all I got in my head. Okay, right now. Okay, all of a sudden there's a string of murders over a summer, and the Son of Sam style, right? Just all these murders, something happening, and but it comes down to it's one person committing all these crimes, right? And they can use all the evidence to point back to this one
Mhm.
person. Do you think that there's one, species or that's responsible for all of these incursions over, however long it goes back? Or is there multiple? Is it how many different crafts you think? Do you think each event is one singular craft, or do you think that craft was responsible for multiple sightings? I mean, clearly this is hard to know,
Yeah.
but I don't know. We're just spitballing here.
No, that's
What do
an
you think?
extremely on point question. It's an important question. So I went back through, I tried to find the earliest good USO cases I could find. I'm a huge fan of ancient UFO sighting collections.
Yeah,
I've
me
gone
too.
through
Love that.
all of them. I think all of that are published. I've read them all. And looking for good water-based cases. There's a couple of potential water-based cases that go way back, but actually not that many. Better aerial cases, not a lot of good water cases.
Sure.
The first good, totally reliable case that gives me confidence took place a little over 300 years ago in 1717.
Wow.
There's a couple of potential ones earlier, but this
Sure.
one's off the coast of Martinique, a French ship, middle of the night. They see something. The captain reported it. It's interesting. But from that point to today, there's several basic types of shapes that are reported. Disc-shaped, cigar-shaped, spherical orb-shaped, glowing orbs, non-glowing orbs. Since the late 70s, particularly, triangles. Things like this. So the question is, are they all from the same source? And then you look at in terms of their behavior. Are there behavioral changes? Like I've tried to understand all of
Yeah.
this.
Sure.
And I'll just give you my opinion, which
Yeah.
is that we are dealing with more than one type of intelligence that's watching us. Yes, that's my opinion. It looks like that to me. It's what I tend to think, but I'm not one of these people that can say, "Oh, I know that there's X number of aliens that are here." I mean, you hear this,
Sure.
and I just wonder how do you know this? I'm working off of the data. I'm trying to make inferences, and I want to be careful, but it does look to me that we're probably dealing with a certain number of different types of intelligences that are here watching us. I've got all my own theories as to why I think that's the case, and they could be relevant or not. I tend to think that we humans are very interesting right now. We have a certain level of technological scientific development that, it's only been a few generations that we were living in wooden huts, basically, not that long ago. And
100%. Yeah.
snap of a finger, here we are now.
Yeah.
I'm having a digital virtual conversation with you from
Yeah.
however far away we are. Like, that's kind of
Yeah.
amazing. So,
Yeah.
and we're not done. We're on the verge of strong AI and nanotech and quantum computing and who knows where else. So I think we're interesting to anyone that's able to observe us. And that's what it looks like. Like when I look at the development of humanity over the 20th century, particularly, that's our amazing transformation century. In terms of the ocean, especially, like we only just started to dip into the water with functional submarines at the beginning of the 20th century.
Yeah.
Like if you were down there watching humanity, thinking, yeah, the ocean's a good place for us to be. They can't really see us. We're pretty secure. We can handle it really well, and we're safe. You're going to be tracking these very inquisitive, very intelligent humans who are and very warlike humans. We love to fight, and we're militarizing the oceans. We're putting our scientific explorers down the ocean. We're putting in sonar submarines and the nuclear submarines. Like very short period of time. I got to think they're watching this, and this is something I actually do incorporate into my books. These 3 volumes. I'm not afraid to speculate a little bit on their behalf. I think it's fair.
Sure.
And my
Absolutely.
speculation is they're watching us and they're like, these humans, they don't stop. They don't stop. And so they're adapting to us because I think it is very evident that they are not interested in having an open communication with us. I think that is very strong. Yeah, I think they're not into it. I think that they are extremely secretive about what they are doing. That might or might not mean they're hostile. I have no idea. They are definitely observing.
Sure.
They're definitely observing us. They're definitely, to some extent, I think, interested in monitoring our planet, just as many of us are. We realize we've got an amazing planet here. We've got an incredible amount of eco diversity. I've got a USO case from 1953. If guys in the Amazon, deep into the Amazon jungle, and there's a major body of water there, and they see, 1953, a kind of elongated craft on the water. They're looking inside and they see beings that look human, very young, very fit, very like youthful, and those types of reports happen. And there was like 6 or 7 people in there, basically maximum occupancy based on the size of this craft.
Yeah.
And they said the thing just took off and zipped the hell out of there. But where they were was in one of the most ecologically rich places on planet Earth.
Sure.
And I don't think that's a coincidence that these people, beings, whatever they were hanging out in that region. I think there's only one reason you're going to be there, because it's an incredibly ecologically rich place. And so
Sure.
they're checking it out. And there's other cases like that where I think they're monitoring the ecosystem of our world.
No, that's an interesting thought. I've had those conversations as well. The purpose of it, and do you think that maybe these beings have been here? Well, I know we said potentially, and I kind of agree that if, again, I'm in a different camp. I'm not sure if it's all entirely true, but if it were true, I'm in that world right now. Let's assume this is all true. It makes sense that there would be multiple species. Do you think at least one or all of them have been, under the water the whole time, whatever, living on Earth, and we've sort of developed more than they thought we would,
Right.
and are just trying to, make this work somehow on here, but eventually those two worlds are going to collide, and there's no, way around it.
I can't tell how long they've been down there. When I look at ancient UFO aerial reports, I'm kind of hard on the ancient aliens thesis. Let me just say that. And there's a lot of folks in the UFO community. They don't really like my position on this, but I don't care at this point. I'm not here to debunk ancient aliens. I think that there are some very good ancient stories. Can't really call them reports or cases because they weren't really investigated, but they're interesting stories that I would say, yes, seems credible to me and believable that something unusual and, let's say, anomalous was happening. Some of them are in ancient early Europe. Some of them are in early Japan and China. They recorded some very good ones over there. And maybe India, but definitely they're out there where people were writing these things down. So, and you got some interesting like oral history tradition from native tribes in North America.
Yeah.
Certainly, you want to take all of these into account. So there's something at least to go on, but in terms of water-based, there's much less. And what I can say is I wouldn't rule it out as an impossibility that there are ancient underwater bases, but I really can't say that I've got evidence for that, because I haven't not found any. What I believe I have evidence for is reasonably reliable testimony going back a little over 300 years, and quite possibly earlier. There's the Christopher Columbus sighting that he had just before he made landfall.
Yeah.
And I actually discussed that in this book. It's not an official case, but I spent a few pages talking about it. And it is interesting. And
I agree.
it's potentially anomalous, but it's also potentially not. And I go on both sides of that. So it's not impossible that we've got a more ancient aspect. And, keep in mind, we humans, we've only been really traversing the large oceans for the last few centuries. I mean, there were the Vikings, there were a couple of exceptions, but for the most part, we were landlubbers hugging the coastline. There's a few
100%.
bodies of water. The Mediterranean, okay, yes. Parts of the East or South China Sea, to some extent. The Arabian Sea, connecting the Middle East to India, yes.
Yeah.
Especially along the coastline there. So those will go back a few thousand years, but No one was crossing the Pacific Ocean or the Atlantic Ocean.
They didn't even know how big the world was or that it was round. Like, you know what I mean? Yeah,
And
absolutely.
the
You're right.
amount of traffic was also way less, far
Sure.
less. So
Sure.
you're not going to get as many opportunities. So we don't really know, and
Yeah.
that's a big black hole in our knowledge. It's tough to say how far back this goes in the ocean. I don't really know how to make
Yeah.
a conclusion there.
And no, I'm with you. You know, I always think about this. You know, speaking of Spain earlier, there's a part of there's a trip in Spain and Europe you can take. It's mostly in Spain. Your sister would know about it. It's called El Camino de Santiago, and I took it. I have a tattoo here. You get an arrow. You know,
Sweet.
you basically I walk like 600 miles on foot in Spain. Right, every day you walk in a lot, just staying in hostels and sleeping outside and you just walk the whole country on foot. It's the most amazing experience. And
That's awesome.
it's an old trail. There's many trails, but it goes back to the day of the apostles and Jesus. I mean, it goes back a long time.
Okay.
And that's what it's for. Like it was the St. Paul used to take that trip. And
In Spain?
yeah. Yeah.
I
So
didn't think he ever went that far.
he's buried in Santiago de Compostela, which is in Galicia, northern part of Spain.
Shows how much I know.
Oh, please. I didn't know any of this either.
Okay.
And there's a part at the end of the trip.
I thought
where
he died in Rome. I thought, right? Wasn't he supposedly
that's the
Rome?
story. That's the story that's
Okay, well,
there.
whatever.
Maybe it's they've been lying this whole time. I don't know.
What do I know?
You know.
What do I know? I'm not going to argue.
But look up El Camino when you're done. You'll be like, oh, this is crazy. Like
Very
the story
interesting.
behind. Yeah, it's thousands of people take it yearly. And it goes through all of Europe, but mainly it's in Spain and it ends in Santiago de Compostela. That's why it's
Gotcha.
called El Camino de Santiago. So, but anyway, after you get to Santiago de Compostela, there's an extra 30 kilometers that you can take that people really like. That finalizes the trip, and you go to the ocean, right? To the end. And Finisterre just means like end of earth, right? Fin and stera, like terrain, right? So end of the earth. And that they call it Finisterre because they thought that was the end of the earth. That when you reach the ocean there, that's it. Don't go out there. You will fall off the edge. And I always think about that because we are in another Finisterre moment in life and humanity, right? There's another reality that we don't know. We think, you go out there, you're going to fall off the edge of the earth. There is no more. This is it. It's water from here on out. But the truth was, no, there was a whole other part of the world that had yet to be discovered, right? And I think we're in that same moment. What is out there past that horizon? But to me, there is something. I don't think there's not anything. I think even if I don't, there is some phenomena that I just don't know what's happening. I can't explain it. That Finisterre, right? That line. Yeah.
Consider that and I got this directly from Admiral Tim Gallaudet, who a lot of people know who he is. He was for a while the U.S. Navy's top oceanographer, and he knows the oceans. So what he said to me is that, we have mapped about 25% of the ocean floor worldwide to a satisfactory extent scientifically, and I don't even know how they do this, but 5% of the ocean's volume. So when you think about it, like you get down into the water, especially if you're below 200 feet down, it starts getting dark really fast. The sunlight doesn't penetrate, and it is murky as anything. Like it's not like you have any visibility down there. You have no visibility.
And the pressure, right? The water pressure.
The water pressure will prevent any submarine from going down, more than like maybe
worse than space.
2,000 feet at the most for some.
Yeah.
That's probably the limit. And maybe not even that much. And, keep in mind the Pacific or the Atlantic Ocean or the Indian Ocean, they go down about 15,000 feet or more.
Yeah.
You're talking 3 miles. Sometimes in the case of the Mediterranean, it's only 10,000 feet. Gee, only 2 miles. Big. That's very deep. So it's very hard to get down there. The pressures are overwhelming. It's dark. You need electronic detection capabilities. You need sonar, which we can do. I don't know what other really excellent technologies they have to like perceive things. There's sonar, and that is quite useful. And we've got very good algorithms now to detect digitally what this sound might mean as opposed to that, and so forth. And I'm sure there's other technologies as well that I don't even know about. But still, like, there's just a lot of mystery down there. I don't think we haven't really tracked most of this vastness. And so there's a lot of opportunity for a great unknown whatever to be down there.
Oh, I agree. Let's briefly talk about these alien bases that I did hear you bring up in the Jeremy Corbell interview, actually, because I made a video about it. I was like, oh, I love talking about alien bases.
Oh, right.
For,
Yeah.
for Danny Sheehan talk about it, extensively,
Yeah.
made several videos on it. I just find that idea so fascinating that there could be these bases that are just right under our nose and
Yeah.
all over the place. So let's just kind of break in. Like, when we say alien base, like, what are we saying exactly?
I think that's a great question. I think I don't know that I can say I know exactly where they are. Some people might
Sure.
feel that way, but I can say I've got a pretty decent guess as to where I think they probably would be based on the activity that I have recorded in my research. I have
Yeah.
on my Google Earth, I have a yellow pin on every single case with the date, when it happened, and so forth. I've got them
Wow.
organized by decade. I can say I want to look at all the cases from the 1960s, and I can do that. So it's very well organized. So I can say that there's a few places that look very interesting to me. One is north of Puerto Rico. If I had to throw money down at any one location, I would say somewhere near the Puerto Rico Trench, which, by the way, is super, super deep. It goes down over 25,000 feet, talking more than 5 miles. It's,
Wow.
I think, the second deepest trench in the world. Marianas Trench in the Pacific is deeper.
Is the deeper,
But
yeah.
the Puerto Rico Trench is very large, very deep. It goes for a long way, too. And we are not able, I mean, other than through like really special operation, you get a really good bathysphere, you can go down there. But practically speaking, we don't have submarines that can go down there. No way.
Sure.
There nonetheless has been a lot of activity reported in and around that area. I would be surprised, honestly, if there were not some kind of semi-permanent or kind of permanent non-human operation there or location. It does seem to be a place where they clearly feel it's safe for them to hang out, because who's going to mug them down there? No one.
Yeah.
Off. Yeah, sorry.
It's funny.
That was an old Evander Holyfield line.
Yeah.
I think it was from Seinfeld. He's talking to George Costanza, and he said something like, "Who's going to mug me?" I'm like,
Yeah.
"No one's going to mug you, Mr.
You're right.
Holyfield."
Yeah.
Anyway, I've always thought of that. But there's
That's
another
really-
place, Catalina Island, off Southern California coast.
I've covered that.
No
Yeah.
question.
Near Baja, right?
Yeah, north of Baja California, but
North of Baja, yeah.
off the LA, off of Los
Sure.
Angeles
Okay.
area there. You have the Channel Islands, and the most well-known of those is Santa Catalina Island. There's others, and there's other activity in those, but Catalina Island definitely has the most of all of the Channel Islands. And some very, very weird, interesting reports come out of there. Quite a few, especially since the 1970s, although a few earlier. It really gets kind of heavy duty in the 1980s and onward, as far as reports.
Sure.
And I suspect that there's something there. There's a base down there. There's other places, though.
But do you think, like, and that's a reasonable, logical, path to take that you're taking, right? You've seen a lot of activity in one particular spot. Okay. But it could, I mean, since we're spitballing here, it could mean just that there's something there that they like to go to. It doesn't necessarily mean that there would be a
That's
base
right.
there, because there's so
Could
much
be.
activity.
Yeah.
But I think it's reasonable to also put that in there as a consideration,
Well,
that they might have some sort of, galactic helipad.
There's
right?
something that Catalina Island and Puerto Rico have in common, which is that you've got a big U.S. Navy presence in both of those areas, and you have to ask yourself
isn't that where the Tic Tac happened incident near there?
Close, yeah. The Tic Tac was off of Baja. It was not that far, not that far from that whole area. That's right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's a genuine USO element to that. That's going into my third volume, that case. But there are, you've got a U.S. Navy connection in many of these, and you have to ask, like, okay, could these USOs be U.S. Navy tech? Are they working with something very advanced? I've asked myself this question many times. I don't think the answer is yes. I think the answer is no. What I think is that the tech is monitoring the United States Navy. That makes a lot of sense to me, because one of the things that I think they are doing is they are monitoring our technological development and our capabilities, and that has to include military capabilities. So you would look at the U.S. Navy. Of course you would.
Sure.
You would look at the Soviet-Russian Navy, and they've got their collection of cases, quite a few. So I think that's actually what's happening. But there's other places where I think there are bases. I believe probably off the Atlantic coast of South America, maybe near Buenos Aires. I would take a guess. There's some very interesting cases and reasons to think there's something there. A lot of researchers in that area believe there's a base there. It doesn't seem illogical to me. But then, there's other locations. You've got the South China Sea, which is all the way up, in Asia. And that's not an impossibility to me. There's a fair amount of activity there. Also, there's some crazy activity in the northern central Pacific, like off the Aleutian Islands. You're talking middle of nowhere. There's nothing there. But there's military interest there because you're between Russia and the United States. And it's so it's geostrategically.
Is that up north more, like off Alaska? Like,
yeah. So it's very it borders with what's called the Bering Sea up there, and that's not a tourist destination. We'll just put it that way. It's a very
my father was in the Air Force, and he was stationed out there in some weird little island off Alaska, between Russia and Alaska.
There's Adak Island, ADAK, which is you had a military base there for the U.S. for a long time. And in fact, they
monitored like missiles or something. I remember him telling. He's rest in peace. My father passed 10 years ago, but I remember all the stories growing up because he just hated that he was stuck out there in the freezing, whatever. Sucked. But it sucked. Oh, it sucked. He said it was horrible. They basically lived underground. He said, essentially.
I wonder, did he say the Aleutian Islands?
I don't remember the exact. It's been so long, I can't remember. But it was a base, and they were basically monitoring. He said, any activity from Russia, missiles being shot over to America. If that happened, they would be, the first ones to see it. In fact, he even said they shot a missile one time and they had to take care of it. And I was like, that's not in the news. There's no story of that during that time when my dad was. And he's like, I don't know. That happened. I was there. It did happen.
Totally believe it.
Oh, that's crazy. That
where he was.
How many things happen like that don't become public knowledge, essentially.
Well, that region. So that's very interesting, and I'm glad you mentioned it. That whole region. So if you get a chance to look at the Aleutian Island chain, it's very long, very long. It goes from Alaska. It stretches all the way, practically.
It has to be that.
Kamchatka.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of tiny little islands there. So Adak is one. There's another one called Shemya Island, and I've got cases from both of those areas. One from 1945, one from 1952. They're both amazing.
Yeah.
And you're absolutely remote. And there's a bunch of others from later years, a little further off them, but still, fairly close. So there's something happening up there. And you got to wonder.
Some activity, yeah.
Like if one of them, I was just looking at today from 1952, Shemya Island is very west. It's closer to Russia than to Alaska and the mainland. And this guy was he was a rigger, I think an oil rigger. I don't know what the hell he was doing there. He wasn't military. And he writes this letter 14 years later, handwritten letter to NICAP, the organization. They were very big at the time, relatively. For a UFO group, they were big. And the letter never went anywhere. It just goes to NICAP and it sits there. And the late Carl found this letter years later. So the guy, we have his name, is Eldon L. White. He had the day off it was in January of 1952. So it's cold. This is cold. It's very remote. The island itself is like 4 miles long. You can't. There's no nightlife there. You can't go out to a club. He had the day off, so he's outside just looking at the ocean. That's it. And he said, I looked up about 300 feet above me is this object. It was a bat-shaped object, described in a lot of detail. It was metallic. It had two glowing lights all along this curved front wing area. And there was a kind of a cockpit that glowed red, he said, like a dome. It had a red glow on the inside. And it was this little appendage coming from the back of the tail, like a thin little rod. He says, I'm looking at this thing, and it starts to descend almost like a leaf, like a floating leaf, and then it stops. And it says that by now it's only 75 feet above me. It's very close. That's very close. And it stopped and hovered motionless for a few seconds, keeping in mind that area in January is always windy. It's bad weather every day, and it's very windy. But this thing was stable. And then he said, after a few seconds, it just fell like almost off a shelf, and it goes directly at an angle into the water.
That's crazy.
That had to blow his mind. And he said, I stood there for a while, waiting for it to come out of the water again, but it never did. Sure. And that's his whole story. I have to think this had to be the most amazing thing this guy ever saw in his life. Yeah. And he writes about it 14 years later. No surprise that it took that much time. Back in the 50s, where are you going to write to for these? Like, it's not like there were UFO groups all over the place to take your report.
Yeah.
It's not like you really know. So he sat on it, and he finally writes it out, handwritten, longhand letter in 1966. Eldon L. White was his name. No one knows who this guy is. And maybe no one at NICAP even followed up on it. But we have the letter, and it was a detailed letter. Carl found it, and I found it through Carl. I was very grateful. So, like, you got to ask yourself, Shemya Island, who is going to fly experimental military tech out there at that time? Like, sure. No one. I'm sorry. Yeah. There's nothing there. It's certainly not a natural phenomenon, the way he.
Oh, that's crazy. And how many stories are like that we just don't know about? The guy didn't write the letter. Yeah. He did that. You know what I mean? That's like, right. There's probably more of those than not.
I think about this, and I absolutely agree with that. You got to wonder. It's like, first of all, how many people have seen these things that they never report? It's got to be a lot. And then you have to ask, how many of those things just do their thing without us even seeing?
100%.
Like, that's an unknowable amount.
Yeah.
You've got to assume.
You would have to assume it's more, right? If they're that stealth, whatever. And every once in a while we see them. And then from that, the ones that do get seen, only a small percentage actually report them. Yeah. So the sightings are probably just through the roof, and the instances are probably through the roof. We don't even see they're not sightings because we don't see them. Like you said, they're not observed in that moment. Yes, exactly. I agree with that. Actually,
I think there's an active infrastructure with these beings. This is something I would like to see other researchers get into this. This is not something that I ever hear anyone getting into. I'm interested in it. So I speculate and I think about it. And I don't know how you would follow up with the scientific study of this, but there seems to be a way that it should be possible at least to speculate intelligently about this. I've tried to figure out like how many UFO sightings I think occur per year and this type of thing. But you really, like, if we assume that there is an intelligence that's here, they're operating around the world. You go through the reports, you can find good ones every single day. Every single day, there's good reports. And that's only of what we're getting. So what is the amount of traffic? How many of them? What are they doing? Again and again, what are they doing?
It's like crimes. Crimes are committed, but how many are reported? How many are caught, right? Like it's innumerable. We're definitely not getting the majority. And I would assume that's the same for these, sightings, like you're saying. I think about these bases, right? We call them a base, alien base, some sort of, underground structure or something. I just think, what are they doing all day? This is what I think about all alien stories, right? UFO stories. I think, what are they doing all day? What are the beings doing all day? Is there like a break room? Do they have bunks? Are
Yeah.
they living there? Do
Maybe some ping
they?
pong below the, below the
Yeah,
level.
yeah, some
What are
ping
they?
pong. Like, what are they doing? Is it a study, like some sort of, like, we have in Antarctica or the North Pole, right? Like, like a little base to study things, right? Like just a little, or what is it? Like, what do they build them there? They deconstruct them there? They analyze it? I just wonder, what is the day to
Yeah.
day
There's
look
some
like?
really interesting things. Like you go into reports of people who've had abductions or alleged abductions, let us say, or other types of
Sure.
encounter experiences. And one thing that I'm still waiting for is someone reporting like a casual alien conversation over a cup of coffee or telling jokes.
Yeah,
Or
yeah,
like, oh damn it, I got to get off this shift. What
yeah,
are you going to do tonight? Like they don't do that. And
yeah.
so why does that not ever come to us? It's like serious. This is not, I mean, it sounds funny, but
I'm with
when
you. I
when
agree.
people report these, yeah, it's like, are they are now there could be a good reason for this. So I don't want to make
Sure,
it sound like I'm dismissing it. Uh
sure.
A, these other beings, they seem like all business. That's one thing.
Sure.
Now, if you're encountering someone in the military or a military group and they've got you in custody, they're going to be all business too. Very
Right.
likely. They're not going to be screwing around and cracking jokes with you. So we should,
Yeah.
keep things like that in mind. They have a job to do, and they are showing us only one side of themselves. And also, presumably, they're different species. They think differently. Their mind is different. So it could be kind of difficult for them to kind of like just hang out and be casual with us. I can imagine all of that, but still, we don't really get any insight into their lives. What are they like? We get some if you take some of the abduction literature
Correct.
seriously. I'm thinking of people like David Jacobs, who did have, he actually had a lot in there. Not everyone accepts what David Jacobs says. I tend to have a lot of respect for his work, but I don't know that it's a complete story either. But I think he's got part of it. But the point is, we don't really know, what are these guys like.
I
What are
agree.
they like? Do they have
I
downtime?
agree.
Do they have a philosophy? Do they have sex? Seriously, do they make,
Right.
how do they reproduce? Do they have what we would call entertainment?
Correct.
What are they?
Art.
And
Yeah,
it's very
I
hard
agree.
to know that.
Politics. Yeah, I agree with all of that. I think if they don't have anything like art or entertainment or humor or music, or I think boring. That's a boring life. I don't care how advanced you are. I don't care if you can control a sun. If you don't have the things in life that make it worthwhile, right? Like, great, volcanoes are great and mountaintops are great, but without like a field of roses, like, what does earth really
I'm
even
with
mean?
you.
Like,
I'm
you know what
100.
I'm saying?
And even the
Like,
people who will say like, "Oh, I had this wonderful experience, telepathic download, or I met in person some wonderful," like you don't really get a sense of their aesthetics or of their art or their creation or their music
yeah,
or anything like that. And we're getting into abduction theory here, but with Jacob's work, uh, his conclusion was that these beings are kind of sociopathic, and they're not actually. Uh, they don't create. They learn from us to create things like music or any kind of art or creative expression. His take, again, people can accept it or not, is
yeah,
that
of course.
they're messed up, and we would not want to hang out with these people, these beings, left to our own
Jesus,
devices.
that
That's his.
sounds
That's his.
horrible. I mean, that just sounds horrible to me. One, I just think music, that's impossible. Other species are going to find music is natural. They're literally sounds that happen. We didn't invent music. We discovered music. It's
Yeah,
like math. We don't invent math. We discover math. These are things that it's out there. I'm a musician. I play music. Like, these are just natural sounds that can be made in the real world and are found in the real world. Everything has a sound, a frequency to it, right? Like, and
totally.
music is
Yeah,
just putting that together in some sort of performance, right? And I don't know. I just find it like, how do you not have life without this sort of art or entertainment? Or it's like, appreciating art is really just an expression of the life being, right? That's art, right? You're just expressing inside, and then we all get to enjoy that expression that you had. And I think, how is that not like everywhere across the universe, with all the different life, that they wouldn't have art, music, and I don't know.
Creative aesthetic expression,
Yeah. Yeah.
because you want to create something beautiful.
Sure.
I,
And
I
art doesn't have to be, I mean, this is going to
it
sound
doesn't have to
weird.
be beautiful, I guess, right?
Yeah. Well, what I mean is even war could be an expression of art. I hate to say that, but
Well,
it's like
we
you're
talk about
expressing.
the art of warfare.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, it's kind of like, yeah, exactly.
I'm a huge fan of
It's
boxing. It's my favorite thing to watch at night, and that is an art. To me, a boxing match is
I agree.
it's like a painting in motion, and everyone
The
is a unique
dance, right?
expression.
Yeah,
It's
I'm with
absolutely
you.
fascinating. So yeah, you can look at
100%.
art in a variety of ways.
Yeah, I just think, how we wouldn't have those things. I guess I hear so many stories of, like you said, people having just a close encounter, the first kind, second kind, third kind, right? You would go down the line. And I just really, what I spend a lot of time speculating on is, what are these beings? What are they like? What do they do on their home planet or wherever they're from, dimension, time, whatever? Um, yeah, what does their society look like? What are they doing? Because to me, it helps me try to understand their motivations for being
Well,
here.
one
Why are
thing that
they here on Earth?
I would say, if you want to know what they're like, let's speculate about our own future as far into the head as we can. I have a pet theory. I got a lot of pet theories, but one is that we're becoming like them.
Yeah.
Because I tend to believe that there is now some people will say you're just anthropomorphizing. It's like, all right, fine, I'm
Sure.
guilty. I think I'm right though. I think that there are certain uh, I haven't really written this out as a formal theory, so I'm still, but I think there's a inexorable logic to life forms that develop abstract thought, intelligence, mastery of mathematics, science, and all of that. Like once you get that, once you're able to engage in speech, abstract speech, things like this, you're on the road because now you're manipulating information, you're manipulating data to increase
Yeah.
your own power on this planet. That's what we did. We've increased power over the other species. We control other species. It's all second nature to us. We don't even think about it.
Yeah.
We're used to getting our own way because we've mastered certain principles, and we've got these great hands that are very useful and all of that. So I think once any species does that, you're on the road, and you are, at some point, you're going to discover science, and at some point you're going to discover like computers and digital control of information. And when you do that, you're going to continue to evolve and change your own species to adapt to the new ecosystem that you've created for yourself. So we evolved in a natural ecosystem over hundreds of thousands, millions of years, but now we've created this artificial ecosystem, and we are adapting to it. And you can see it in our world, sociologically, psychologically. We are changing very rapidly.
You're right.
All of the arguments that we're seeing politically and all of this stuff, I think a lot of it is actually related to the fact that we are transforming very rapidly in a way that it's exciting, but it's also very disconcerting. And now you're in a world where people are staring at their phones 24/7.
Yeah.
And I mean, seriously, where we have less of an expression of emotions, I believe, than we used to. I mean,
Yeah.
emotions are the literal initial first language ever.
You're
How are
right.
you going to express to some other being before you have spoken words that this is good or bad or whatever? You're going to do through emotion
Sure.
and facial
Yeah.
expressions. So that's our initial communication. We're moving away from that. So we're moving toward a much more rationalized system of communication where emotions increasingly are being siphoned out. I mean, people still get angry, they get furious and all of this, but you can
Sure.
see, generally speaking, it's happening. And
Sure.
so when you look at the aliens that people are saying that they're encountering, most of them don't crack many jokes. Most of them they don't express, they can express emotion that the person will feel, but not through facial expressions.
They're not emoting themselves.
No,
Yeah, exactly.
right.
Not in the same way. Yeah, that's interesting.
So, I mean, this is just my own theory. I think that
Yeah.
we're on the same exact path.
Yeah.
There's
Like,
several
it seems inevitable that life
eons
just
ahead.
goes down that path, is what you're saying, no matter
Yeah.
what. If we were on
Once
another planet, yeah, that makes
once
sense.
you get a certain type of intelligence,
Sure.
then I think you become, in a sense, a slave to that intelligence, because you need that intelligence for your own survival. It's like once you develop fire,
Yeah.
it's like you can't live without it. Yeah, your
Yeah.
ancestors lived without it. They figured out a way. But now that you've got it, now you're moving into northern climates. You got to have the fire. And that
Correct.
means you have to organize your society around getting wood and knowing how to
Sure.
start fires. Like you create and that causes you to learn more because you're on this thing. And so you have to keep going now, because you're now living in a way that physiologically you actually were not designed to live in. And so you
Sure.
must have more intelligence and science and rationalization of your world. And so I think I'm going to guess that's probably a universal path that intelligent life forms anywhere must
I
take
like it.
if they develop a certain amount of intelligence. So I think
I
if
like
you
it.
want to find out, what they're like, well, it's not the worst thing in the world to extrapolate. Well, what are we becoming?
Sure. Well, what else are we gonna do? We only have us to look at, like, you know what I mean? It's like, how else am I gonna not look at it through human eyes? Hello, I
So,
only can do that. Like, it's kind of I agree. It's somewhere to start, right? I
yeah.
think curiosity, in my opinion, is at the basis of curiosity is like this base, you know, life sort of, characteristic. Right. It has to be if being,
Any life form, even
right.
for,
Yeah. It's curiosity.
what we call lower life forms, other types of animals, they have curiosity. They have to,
You
because
have
they need
to.
to. You've got to look, like, am I safe or not safe? I have to
Correct.
investigate this area here. If you look at other primates, my cat, who she's sleeping on the couch right there, but she has curiosity.
Correct.
She'll investigate. So yeah, I think life forms need that, and
Otherwise, they
ours is
wouldn't
a
be
little more.
coming here, right? Traversing, whether it be space or however you think they move or whatever, through dimensions, through time. Curiosity, right? Why come to our planet? I mean, we're clearly curious. We're trying to go outside of our own planet and go search. And it
Yeah,
just
yeah.
seems like a natural phenomenon, like you said, from any life form down to bacteria is curious. Viruses, you might argue,
In
are
their way,
curious. Yeah, in their way,
in their
exactly.
way,
And I think
to the level that
curiosity,
they
even
can.
the universe is curious to some extent.
Hey,
You
there's some
know,
cool theories about the universe being like alive or conscious, and we've all seen the images of the
yeah,
neurons connections
and
compared
the
with the
brain.
galaxy connections. Yeah, the brain and the
Yeah,
universe, and there
crazy.
are actually some smart scientists who actually do theorize about this, and I don't know if they're right, but it's quite interesting.
Super interesting. Well, we just don't know the scale at which we're living. Right? We don't know, are we big in the universe? Are we small? Are we inside another universe, right? Like our universe, like we don't know
That
the scale of things. And that's interesting to me, where we are on the scale, on the ladder scale, right? Like how big do things get and how
like
small we think we found, but we don't know, right? That's interesting.
there's a writer 400 years ago, Blaise Pascal. He was a genius. He actually he said the same thing. He said, we're right in the middle. Like if you go all the way down, because by the early 1600s, I think when he was writing, they were aware, you could get pretty tiny. And he said, or massively large, like we're in a good place. But actually, if you really look at the scale of the universe, we're tiny as hell, man.
We're tiny as hell,
We
dude.
are, our
Exactly.
galaxy is tiny as hell.
Yeah.
Our
Yep.
galaxy.
Yep.
I mean, it's really incredible when you really think about how utterly massive the cosmos is. And then, you got people theorizing, yeah, and what's beyond that?
I agree. What's beyond? There has to be. How can it just end? I mean, you're traveling in the universe in a spaceship and you just get to a wall. You can't go anymore. I mean, this doesn't
Yeah,
make any sense. But
that's
then I think, how can infinity be true too? Everything just goes forever. Like that's also mind blowing.
this is like
I
this is welcome to the late night conversations I have with my wife Tracy. Like this is
Yeah.
where we go.
Oh, me too.
So we
Me
have
too.
fun
My
with it.
wife and I talk about this kind of stuff too. Like, this is why I love this topic so much. I may be very skeptical of things and maybe not just jumped in, the boat of believing we have been visited on this planet. But I find the conversation so fascinating because these are realities that even if they haven't been proven now, I think they're real at some point. I mean, I don't think we're alone in the universe, like at all, by any small. I mean, I think life is teeming through the universe. We just haven't found the right capabilities to see it all. And then the question becomes, okay, have we been visited here? Well, there's a ton of cases going back, so long, just like you mentioned before. And I even find cases that start from like pre, 1900 and before, because you can kind of get rid of all of the arguments of, it's a psyop, it's a government cover up.
Yeah.
There's this, there's that, right? All those filters that can get in the way of, well,
Yeah.
how come
And
there's so
there's
much
a few
stories
good
going
ones.
back so long,
There's a
right?
few good ones from the 19th century, and I do have those in my first volume here, and they're valuable for that reason.
Yeah,
It's a handful compared with what happens later. I think there was a
sure.
big jump during the Second World War, but there are some good ones that you got to take seriously, and I try to make them as clear as I can in this book. So I agree with you. Like, you got to wonder, who are these people? Yeah,
Yeah,
the
who are
mysteries
they?
of the universe. So I mean, look, this is one of the most fun things,
So
and
it's so fun.
I like the fact that I'm not smart enough to figure it all out. I like the
I
fact
agree.
that there's some mysteries out there that I'm never going
Yeah.
to get to the bottom of.
For sure. I mean, that's life. I always say I don't want to know everything. I always want there to be another corner that I don't know what's around that corner. Like
You
I
know,
want that.
Whitley Strieber, who I love Whitley, and he's a very smart man, and he's very deep. He's very philosophically deep. And one thing, of course, he's a contactee, or he's an abductee, or at least that's what he has always said for years. Um,
Yeah.
and one thing that he said, never forgotten this. He's talking about the mind of the visitors, as he calls them. And he said at one point, it's like they have a mastery of space time in a way that we do not. And he strongly inferred or stated that they can kind of work outside of what we call time, so that there's no surprises for them. And he speculated that they get a kind of vicarious pleasure out of following we humans, because we're working our way through time, and each moment is the new unexpected surprise. And it's like they can't really get that, according to Whitley, but they can
Sure.
at least vicariously experience it through us. That was one. I don't know if that was a theory of his. I don't know if he still believes that, but he wrote that at least 15, maybe almost 20 years ago.
Yeah. That's interesting. Well, that's an interesting thing. Yeah. I just don't want life to get boring, whatever that is. I don't need to be. We always say an advanced, higher intelligent species, and we'll wrap up here, Richard. We always say an advanced, higher species, but I think advanced in what ways? Just technologically? Like that's what advanced higher intelligence means. You've advanced in technology. But what about, there's so many aspects to life that maybe people don't advance it. Why is that? Why can't you be super advanced and highly intelligent, but you still have spears and create fire with rocks and live in caves? Why isn't that advanced?
I'm going to read you a
But
quote.
Religiously, spiritually, you're more advanced, and
I'm going to read you a quote from Ivan T. Sanderson. I pulled it. It's at the end of my introduction. I'm pretty sure I can just get this. And
love it.
this is really good stuff. Sanderson, he wrote back in 1970. He wrote the first true USO book, and he was a beautiful writer. I mean, I really love his writing, and he did a good job in his research. Not perfect. He's working in the 1960s. It's hard to fact check everything, but he did a good job. So back in 1970, Sanderson concluded his very excellent book with these words. I'm going to read to you, which I have in my book here. It says, that they may be endlessly varied would seem to be an eminently sensible concept, and that some of them live in the sea is no more balmy a notion than that some of them live in the sky, in inner space, or on other solid bodies in outer space. given that much technical command, they could live anywhere or everywhere and move about instantly or faster anywhere throughout space and or time. Then he says this, that this is what made me think of it, what you said, that they are, for the most part, over civilized and quite mad is, in my opinion, an open-ended question, but quite probable. Perhaps we will never be able to cope with them until we, too, all go quite mad. And it looks, as of now, as if we are doing our level best to achieve this presumably enviable estate. We're all trying to go mad. I love that, this idea of hyper advanced intelligence, but giving you a kind of a madness in certain ways. Like, are they actually sane by the standards that we would hold? And that's a really good question. What are their motivations? Are they serving the algorithm just like we are learning to serve the algorithm? I bet they are. I'll bet they are. Their own version of it.
Sure.
Their own kind of, because we have to serve our system, the system that we've created, the system that allows us to have Zoom calls across, StreamYard calls across the world. Like, there's a system in place, and you got to play by the rules. And the world's got to play by the rules to keep all this system in place as it continues to evolve, and we need to continually adapt to serve it. And I'll bet 10 to 1 odds that's what they do. And they've gone quite mad in the process.
Yeah, that's interesting to think about. What was David Duchovny's theory? This will be the last thing I say, and then we'll finish out here. David Duchovny said it maybe as a joke, right? Fox Mulder from X-Files. He said, like, "Oh, I think the aliens are the dentist that the alien species sent out into space to look at us. They're just like evil dentists." I just thought, what? That's the weirdest theory I've ever heard. That's the weirdest theory I've ever heard. But whatever. I don't know. I mean, at the end of the day, even when people say, "Oh, like if Whitley or other," which I'm trying to get Whitley on, I hope he does come on, and other people who have had personal, experiences, and they say, "Okay, I was told this by the entities or whatever," right? I just think, how do you even trust what they're saying to you? Like, how do you know that that's the truth of their species? I mean, we lie as humans all the time, right? If you're trying to get a date, just dating, look at dating. I mean, people lie all the time about who they are, their motivations, their intentions. I just, on a base level, it's kind of not necessarily nefarious, but
they couldn't tell us everything they know. Even with their best intent.
What if they don't even know everything? What if they don't know everything either?
Or what if we don't have the ability to grasp their notion of space-time domination or space-time mastery?
100%.
I mean, I think, I know we got to wrap it up. If you and I went back in time 1,000 years, let's say we go back to medieval Europe, and we find the smartest people in town that we can find. I don't know. How much could we tell them about what we know about this world that we live in today? Not very much.
It's a great point.
Without their heads exploding.
Sure.
Because, I mean, we couldn't. You couldn't. It would be too much. And so imagine now a different species that's even more than 1,000 years ahead, maybe. No, probably be very difficult.
Yeah, and you also think, like, does everyone know everything, right? Like, there's no human on Earth that knows everything about humanity, every aspect, right? They could be even the smartest person in the world. They only know what they've studied and spent their time on.
Yeah,
doesn't mean they know about everything, right? And maybe aliens are the same way, right? It's like, it doesn't mean you can just ask an alien any question. Like, if you asked me, how do you build a nuclear bomb? You know what I'm saying? Like, if I got taken to an alien planet and they're like, "Oh, okay, human, let's ask them, how do you guys communicate with your satellite?" But I don't know. I you know what I mean? I just use it. I don't know how that shit works. You know what I'm saying? I don't know anything. Like, I think could be a part of aliens too, right? Like, we're asking them, what's the secret of it? How does your craft work? I don't know, man. I just jump in this UFO. I have zero idea how this thing works.
Funny, and it could be totally true.
Right? I think it's Probably more true than we
Yeah.
know, to some extent, which maybe is a reason for some of the holes and spaces in some of these stories and knowledges, because they don't know some of this stuff either, which is also fascinating. We're all on this journey together to find out, the truth, even them, which is interesting. And maybe we're a key to that to some extent. Who knows? I don't know.
If I can
We'll
make one
find out.
final statement, I would
Yeah,
just
of course,
say
of
that
course.
we want, we when we're studying this phenomenon, I mean, it's highly complex. You could spend multiple lifetimes studying all the different aspects of UFOs or UAP, USOs. There's a lot going on here. One thing we want to do is we want to try to be as careful with our data as we are able to be within reason. That's one thing. And another thing, though, is we want to not lose focus over the fact that we're dealing with what seems to be a very advanced group of intelligences. They are here for a reason. We want to know what those reasons are to the best of our ability. And we want to know, are they friend or foe? That's important. And it could be either, it could be both, or maybe it could be neither. Maybe there's something else going on here, but we need to be thinking about these things, and we want to know as much about them as we are able to understand. And that may be difficult, but I think with contemporary, the whole UFO conversation as it is happening in our world, that's one thing we're not doing. We're really not doing this. And there's a natural fear of wanting to speculate about an alien intelligence. I understand. You're on dangerous ground. You can easily make mistakes, but that doesn't make
True.
it go away as a problem. And we
Yeah, that's
should
true.
be asking ourselves, who are these guys? What do they want? How long have they been here? What are they doing? And all of these other logical questions, like you're doing counterintelligence on them.
Sure.
Like we can't lose that aspect of it. And I feel like it's kind of slipping away in the last decade of our conversation about UAPs. That's all.
No, that's interesting. No, that's interesting. That's a good point. Look, let's end on a positive note here, Richard. What do you expect for 2025, or what are you looking forward to for the rest of this?
Well,
Just
I'm
in
not.
the UFO topic in
Yeah,
general,
yeah,
not
yeah.
necessarily your book and everything. Just curious.
I'm not expecting a formal disclosure. I've got friends, close friends, who believe it. Disclosure is going to happen this year. I'm not one of them. I don't think it's likely, and I don't even think it's not a high percentage. Not impossible, but not likely. There's
Sure.
there's a very um, detailed and complex cover up that does exist on this. We're fortunately at a point in our society where we are at least able to have an open conversation about this more and more. And we are at least at a point in our society where more, we'll call them whistleblowers, do come out. We had David Grush. He was very impressive, I thought. We have Jake Barber, who I'm very glad we have out. And there's other people too. So I expect more of that, and I expect more splashes in the conversation. But that's not the same thing as saying it's disclosure. We've already had a lot of information come out, and there's been no admission. We're still listening to the Arrow office say, yeah, we're going to look into this for you. We'll get back to you, people. So
Right.
clearly they're not being honest. And don't, we're in a new administration. We've got the ultimate creator of chaos, Donald Trump. He's shaking things
Yeah.
up. Whether you
Yeah.
love the guy or hate him, he is showing right now he is a change agent one way or the other. And
Yeah.
will that include the UFO subject? That's really the question we're asking. And I don't know the answer to that. We haven't
Yeah.
heard anything out of the Luna Committee since it's been announced. It's been kind of gone silent.
Yeah.
And what's that all about? Like, I would like to know. So I do expect that we'll get a couple of truth bombs happen this year. I think it's not impossible that the Luna Committee exposes at least one or two interesting things that could be related to UFOs. I would like to see that, and but I'm not expecting much more than that. I'll be honest.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. And as someone who has yet to cross the finish line into, we're not alone on this planet, I'm still on that journey. But I think the best bet, just in my view, is maybe Skywatcher, just because of the claims Jake Barber and his team are making. I think Wow, these are pretty powerful claims. You're going to prove this and disclose it with the government in the
I'm
next
a little
12
nervous.
months.
I'm a little nervous about that claim.
Sure,
Feels like
sure.
they're really putting themselves out there and
They
setting
are,
themselves up for failure, and I would hate for that to happen.
possibly.
So we'll just have to see. But I will
Yeah,
say, we're also using more and more technology. There's more and more initiatives, some of them private, some like the
sure.
Galileo initiative, Avi Loeb,
Yeah,
where they're setting up basically an array of visual detection connected to AI to differentiate knowns from unknowns. Things like that. Those are good ideas, and I think the more we move ahead with those, the better off we'll be. We want to collect good data as much as we can.
yeah. I think I support any sort of private or whatever project of people like boots on the ground. They're putting their money where their mouth is. They're saying, I think this thing is real. I'm going to go out and try to prove it. I
Yeah.
support that all the way to the end of time. The conclusions, that's a different story. That's a different thing. But I absolutely support looking into this because, like you said, if we start waiting around for the U.S. government to give us the answer to truth, I mean, that's just not their job to do that.
No,
So
I mean,
yeah,
not without a really major, major shakeup,
yeah,
even bigger, a much bigger shakeup than even what it looks like may be happening currently. I think you're gonna have to
yeah,
go pretty far to get to
yeah,
the bottom of this one.
yeah. I agree. Well, Richard, this has been such an amazing conversation, man. And I really thank you for taking the time to come on and just chat with me. And, I'll definitely put links in the description to get your book and some of your other books too
Sure,
that
yeah,
you got
great.
coming out. Is there anything we missed that you want to shout out? Your
Oh, man.
website, your stuff? I don't know.
We could have gone for another 2 hours, without a
Definitely.
problem.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll have to do that again. I enjoyed this
Yeah.
very much with you. Yeah, I have a website. It's just called richarddolanmembers.com. There's free stuff there. There's paywall stuff there, but you can just go there. There's a lot to just want to traipse on in and check it out. Great community of people there. I love the people who are members there. I have a
Awesome.
YouTube channel just called Richard Dolan Intelligent Disclosure. I'll be putting something up soon. Those are the two main ways people can find me. My book is on Amazon. Uh, you just type in Dolan USO. You can't miss it.
Yeah.
And it's also linked from my website. So no, I stay busy. I'm lucky. I get to do something that I love. And when we first got on here, before we were recording, I just said, you ever feel like you're on a 24/7 hamster wheel? There is a little bit of that. There's a little bit of that where you feel like you never get off. And however, I could think of 1,000 things that I would rather not do than what I'm currently doing. I mean, I feel very lucky that I get to research such a fascinating subject and write books about it. Doesn't
Well,
get
like
much
I
better
said
than that.
before we start recording too, man, you're one of the goats. Everyone respects you. I don't think I've ever heard anyone say a bad thing about you, man. Everyone
Oh, they're
respects
out
you yeah. You're like, no,
there.
they're out there for sure. Well, I just think you get a lot of respect on both sides of the aisle, and which is honestly a very hard position to get
I'm
into in this
glad to
topic.
hear
And
that. That's nice.
yeah, I think that's cool. In my opinion, are you going to be at Contact in the Desert by any chance?
I will be, yes, with my wife. So we'll be there. That's end of May, early June, I guess. So
And yeah, I'm
I'll be there.
going. They
Good,
asked me to. They sent me out a email, offer me a press pass, and to go and
good. Well,
yeah, I'm
pick me up.
excited.
We'll talk. I'd love
Definitely.
to see.
I've never been to anything in person in the UFO world,
Oh,
so I'm excited
Tony,
to do
I
this.
I used to do a ton of them. I do very few now, but yeah, maybe that'll change at some point again. I'll do more. Right now, I'm happy with a more limited travel schedule, to be honest with you.
Sure. Of
But Contact
course.
in the Desert is fun. It's a big one. The weather's usually wonderful, and the people who attend, I gotta say, like they are good, very interesting, fun, smart people. And with any of these in-person conferences, the best thing about them all is it's not the lectures, it's the behind-the-scenes conversations that take place throughout, and it's worthwhile. So I'm sure
Oh
you'll
yeah.
enjoy it.
Well, look, I hope I'll get to see you in person and meet you in person there at that. That'll be really cool. So
Please find me. Yeah.
absolutely, of course. Well, thanks again, Richard. Really appreciate it, man.
Thank you, Patrick. It was a pleasure.